The wind slammed into the cabin like it wanted to break through the walls. Cole Walker stood in the dark, the fire at his back, and a pistol in his hand, not because he needed it, but because it was all he knew. His knuckles were white against the steel. His breath steamed the window, fogging the glass enough to erase the black forest beyond. But even without seeing, he knew what was out there: nothing. Not a soul for miles. Not even the sound of wildlife. Just snow. Just silence. And that was the point. He let the pistol drop to his thigh. The muscles in his neck throbbed. He hadn't slept, not really in weeks. He got flashes, doorways, screams, a child's red shoe. The Bureau called it mandatory leave, as if exile could be dressed up with soft language. But they'd shipped him out here with a shrink's note and an until further notice, and that was that. Cole reached for the bottle of bourbon on the counter. It was cheap, Wyoming cheap. No label, no burn, just warm enough to keep the edge off. He poured a shot, swallowed it dry, and stared at the map pinned to the opposite wall. Bridger Teton National Forest. Hundreds of square miles of unbroken white. The kind of place men go to disappear permanently or not. He dragged a hand down his face. His beard was 2 weeks thick. He hadn't shaved since the tribunal. Not since Denver. Not since the bomb. The hostage op gone sideways. The floor plate that he missed. That snap of the trigger when the team breached. That 1 second where he thought, no, he knew they had it. And then it happened. The floor cracked. The explosion took the room. And the boy didn't make it. Cole hadn't said a word at the debrief, not even when they asked him if he wanted to file a defense report. What was there to defend? He turned back toward the fire and sat down heavily in the armchair. The place was stripped to basics. Wood, stone, tin roof, a few survival supplies. He didn't need more. He didn't deserve more. The flames popped in the hearth, one log collapsing in on itself. It was the only sound besides the wind. Out here, the wind screamed like it wanted revenge. "I didn't come here to be found," he muttered into the silence. It wasn't true, but it felt good to say. His therapist had told him to journal, to reflect, maybe draw. The idea made him want to laugh or punch drywall or both. Instead, he stared at the fire and tried not to blink, because when he did, the red sneaker came back. The lights flickered. The wind howled again, but there was something else now. Something beneath the wind. Something off. A sound. Thin, sharp, fleeting. He froze. Not a branch cracking. Not the groan of snow shifting on the roof. He knew those sounds. This was different. It had rhythm. Organic. A high-pitched cry, not human, but close enough to wake something deep. Cole straightened slowly. The cry came again, barely audible over the wind, like it was trying to find a crack in the walls of his mind. It was faint, maybe 100 yards off. He strained to place it, but the storm shredded all directionality. He looked at the front door. No. He leaned back in the chair, forced his body still. Ignore it. His boots stayed planted. It's not your problem. You're not an agent right now. You're just a ghost in the woods. Let nature do what nature does. The cry pierced the wind again, this time softer, weaker. He stood before that he knew he was moving. In 5 minutes he was geared up. Snow pants, insulated parka, tactical flashlight clipped to his belt, thermals zipped tight. His FBI instincts, buried but not dead, kicked into place with brutal precision. He yanked the cabin door open, and the cold punched him in the face like a steel fist. He had to brace against the doorway to keep from toppling over. Visibility near zero, temperature somewhere near hell frozen over. He aimed his flashlight into the white. A swirling wall of ice pushed back. He stepped into the storm. The snow hit him like shrapnel. The wind cut through his gear like needles, but he pressed forward, eyes narrowed, moving uphill. Something in his chest beat louder than the storm. The sound came again, closer now, almost desperate. And then it stopped. No more cries. No more direction. Just silence. Cole paused, chest heaving. He could still go back. Still crawl into the warmth, let the fire eat the memories for a few hours. But that silence, it wasn't quiet. It was the sound of something giving up. And he couldn't walk away from that. Not again. Not again. He climbed another ridge, slipped between two pines, and shined his light down into a shallow snow hollow. That's when he saw her. A large German shepherd coat, black and tan, ice-matted and soaked in blood, lay curled in a crude depression. Her front leg was mangled, clamped in an illegal wolf trap, teeth of the steel jaws digging deep. Her amber eyes locked onto the light, full of pain and defiance. A growl rippled through her chest. Cole took one slow step forward, hands raised. Easy, girl. But she didn't look at him. She looked beside her. He moved the light slightly. 3 newborn pups' eyes, still sealed, barely bigger than his palm, huddled against her belly. They weren't crying. They were trembling. Dying. Cole's heart slammed against his ribs. He was trained to secure, to stabilize, to act. This wasn't a case file. This was now, and there was no one else coming. He crouched slowly. "Okay," he said to her, "okay. I've got you." The wind roared louder, as if mocking the promise. The wind clawed at his parka like it wanted to tear the fabric from his back. Cole pushed forward his flashlight, barely slicing through the dense snow. He moved by instinct now. Not sight, not sound. Just a gut-deep pull toward where he last heard the cry. The storm didn't howl, it screamed a banshee roar, bouncing between the trees. It filled his ears, flooded his senses, tried to erase the world. He couldn't even hear his own breath anymore. But something kept him moving. Not duty, not training, not even the sharp pain of cold burning through his gloves. Something older, something primal. It wasn't the wind. It was begging me to break. That thought landed hard as he spotted the faint hollow again. His boots sank deep, thigh-deep into the drift as he stumbled down into the depression. The light hit her just as it had minutes before, and she was still there. Still staring. Still bleeding. Still guarding. The German shepherd's eyes blazed with a silent, agonizing threat. Her body trembled, but she hadn't moved. She hadn't shifted an inch away from the 3 tiny forms pressed against her belly. They were almost still now, their breathing shallow. Cole crouched, boots crunching snow. She growled a low, broken rumble, but didn't lift her head. That was the first sign she wanted to threaten him, but couldn't. "Easy," he whispered, sliding off his pack. "I'm not the worst thing out here." Her ears flicked. That was all. But it was enough. The trap was brutal. A jagged, rusted wolf snare with serrated jaws embedded in her foreleg. Her fur was soaked with blood, and melted ice crusted stiff along her ribs. The leg was twisted, broken clean through from what he could tell, but the bone hadn't broken skin. Not yet. The muscles around it twitched weakly. "Jesus," he muttered. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. He turned the light down toward the pups. They were barely more than shadows under her. Tiny, trembling, their fur still slick from birth. 2 males, 1 female. The girl was the smallest, not much larger than his palm, curled in against her mother's ribs, too weak to cry. The male beside her wasn't moving. His pulse stuttered. They weren't going to last another hour. Cole reached into his coat and pulled out his thermal scarf. Carefully, he moved it toward the pups. The mother let out a sharp whine, high-pitched, not hostile, pleading. "I'm trying to help," he said softer now. "Let me." She didn't stop him. He gently wrapped the scarf around the 3 pups, creating a small cocoon of warmth. His gloves were thick, clumsy. He peeled them off with his teeth. His fingers hit the air and instantly went numb. He didn't care. One by one, he lifted the pups from under her belly and tucked them inside his jacket directly against his base thermal layer. Their bodies were feather-light. No resistance. No noise. No strength. He zipped the coat, carefully adjusting until he could feel their fragile heartbeats against his chest. 3 tiny pulses, flickering, barely there. "Come on," he whispered. "Stay with me." Now came the hard part. He turned back to the mother. Her head was low now. Her body trembled violently. She was losing blood, losing heat, and had likely gone hours without food or water. Cole moved fast. He pulled the bolt cutters from his bag. "This is going to hurt," he said, positioning them at the hinge of the trap. She whined a deep, raw sound that twisted his stomach. Her gaze flicked between him and the pups he'd taken. "I'm not stealing them. I'm getting you out." He braced, found the tension bar, and pressed down. Hard. The cutters groaned under the pressure. The trap didn't budge. He adjusted. Found the secondary lock. Pressed again. With a crack like a gunshot, the jaws sprang open. The dog let out a shriek, half scream, half snarl, and collapsed to the side, her body curling around nothing, as if her instincts hadn't caught up with the absence of her children. He tossed the trap aside and slid his arms under her body, avoiding the mangled leg. She weighed at least 60 pounds, dead weight, soaking wet. She smelled like blood and cold and something wild, but she didn't resist. He grunted, adjusted her over his shoulder, and stood. The cold hit like a second wave, but he didn't slow. He climbed the ridge boots, punching into powder. The pups wriggled faintly inside his coat, the smallest letting out a tiny, pitiful squeak. "Not yet," he said through clenched teeth. Not yet. It was a half-mile back to the cabin. It felt like 20. Twice he fell. Once he nearly dropped her. He didn't stop. Every step was a fight. The snow dragged at his boots. The wind lashed his face. His back burned from the effort, his lungs howled. But the weight in his jacket and the one slung across his shoulders anchored him. Somewhere deep inside, a memory tried to crawl forward. The red shoe. The sound of a detonator click. Not now. This time there were lives in his hands. When the cabin finally appeared, just a dark smudge through the blizzard, he almost cried. He slammed through the door, half collapsed onto the rug in front of the fire, and gently laid her down. She whimpered. Once. He dropped to his knees, yanked open his jacket, and pulled the pups free, one by one, laying them beside her. The heat of the fire hit like salvation. The mother lifted her head slowly and nosed each pup, licking them frantically, then turned her eyes on him. Cole didn't flinch. He reached up, tugged off his soaked coat, and stumbled to the back room. The tactical medical kit. Not a first aid box. The real thing. He returned and fell to his knees beside her. "All right, Rhea," he said quietly. "I'm naming you now, so don't die on me." She looked at him. No growl, no snarl. Just trust. He got to work. You save them or you let Denver happen again. Cole spoke the words aloud, as if saying them could change what they meant, as if making them real gave him no room to run. Rhea lay stretched out on a folded tarp in front of the fire, the pups tucked against her belly again. One of them, the smallest, barely moved. He could feel its fragile breath against his palm, a weak flutter like a moth wing against his skin. It terrified him more than any weapon ever had. He reached for the field medical kit and opened it with practiced precision. Inside were IV lines, antiseptics, syringes, gauze gear for trauma response in hostile zones. But nothing in the kit had ever been designed for a German shepherd bleeding out in a cabin at the edge of the wilderness. Still, his hands moved without hesitation. The worst of her injuries was the leg. The trap had cut through skin, damaged the muscle, maybe cracked bone. It wasn't clean, but it wasn't fatal, not yet. He doused the wound in antiseptic. Rhea growled low, deep in her chest, but didn't bite. "That's right," Cole murmured. "You hold on. I'll take care of the rest." He splinted the limb with a broken yardstick from the woodpile and tied it off with cloth strips he tore from one of his only undershirts. When he finished, the bleeding had slowed, and Rhea's breathing was deeper, steadier. Not easy, but alive. The pups were another story. They needed warmth, hydration, and something close to milk, none of which he had on hand. He wrapped them in a thermal blanket and set 2 hand warmers beneath it, using a shallow pan of water on the stovetop to warm filtered snowmelt. He dipped a piece of gauze in the warm water and let a few drops fall onto the smallest pup's lips. No reaction. His gut twisted. He remembered the boy from Denver. 11. Curly hair. Smiled at Cole 5 minutes before the blast. Said he wasn't scared. Cole had told him, "You're safe now." The floor collapsed 30 seconds later. He hadn't been safe at all. Cole looked at the pup again, still barely clinging. "Not this time," he said through gritted teeth. He set to work fashioning a syringe drip with a plastic bag and surgical tubing. It was rudimentary, imperfect, but it might get enough fluid into their systems to keep them going. One at a time, he rotated the pups in front of the fire, rubbing them with a towel to stimulate circulation, holding them under his shirt when the cabin's heat faltered. Hours passed. The wind screamed outside. The fire popped and crackled and kept death at bay by inches. Rhea watched everything. Every move. Every drop. Every hand. She didn't sleep. Didn't flinch. She just watched like a mother who'd seen enough loss to know how easily life slipped away. He met her gaze more than once, and every time it felt like a silent pact. "If I don't quit, you won't." At dawn, a weak cry broke the silence. The smallest pup, the female, raised her head for the first time. Her voice was a whisper, a rasp. But it was there. Cole dropped to his knees beside her. "You little fighter." He reached into the blanket and checked the others. Both were breathing stronger now. Pink color returning to ears and paws. Tiny twitching limbs. Hope in miniature. Behind him, Rhea exhaled and closed her eyes, not unconscious this time. Just resting. Cole sat back, exhaling too. He leaned against the wall, let the heat of the fire kiss his face, and allowed for one dangerous second a flicker of relief. Then came the knock. 3 hard raps on the cabin door. Cole froze. No one was supposed to be out here. No one could be out here. The trail was closed, the roads blocked by snow. A 4th knock. Slower. He reached for his pistol, checked the safety, and crossed to the door. He opened it just enough to see the badge. Sheriff Hank McAllister stood in the snow, bundled in a wool coat mustache, frozen, stiff eyes, sharp as ever. His cruiser was half buried 20 feet down the trail, barely visible. "Morning," Hank said. "Mind if I step in a minute?" Cole didn't answer, just moved aside. The sheriff stomped snow off his boots and entered, sniffing the air. "Smells like smoke, blood, and dog." Cole didn't flinch. Hank's eyes swept the room. His gaze landed on Rhea and his jaw tightened. "Son of a bitch," he muttered. Cole stepped in front of her. She's not aggressive. She's unregistered, wounded, bleeding in a living space. That's a hazard by state code. She's not just some stray. She sure as hell ain't yours either. Cole didn't move. "I found her in a snare. She was going to die. So were the pups." Hank sighed and rubbed his gloved hands together. "I'm not here to be the bad guy. I'm just here to remind you the county has rules. Animal control gets the call if I report this. And if I do, they put her down." No discussion. The silence between them thickened. "You got 48 hours, Hank said finally. "Make her legal, get her vax records, register the litter, or call a shelter that'll do it for you." Cole's voice was low. "And if none of them will, then you'll have a decision to make." Hank's tone softened. "I don't want to push you, Walker. I know you've been through hell, but this ain't the way back." As the sheriff stepped outside, he paused in the doorway. "Be careful what you start caring about out here. Snow hides things, but not forever." Then he was gone. Cole closed the door behind him and turned back to the fire. Rhea hadn't moved. She looked at him now not like a wounded animal, but like a question. He ran a hand down his face. 48 hours. He could file paperwork, try to find a shelter, hope they didn't kill her when he handed her over. Or he looked at the map pinned to the wall. The old ranger station. Elk Ridge Lookout. Off-grid. Abandoned. A place no one checked during winter. His jaw tightened. He reached for the map and pulled it down. The answer wasn't going to come from a form. Not this time. This time he wouldn't follow a protocol. This time he'd choose life, even if it broke the law. Because he'd already seen what happened when you followed the rules and still lost everything. Cole looked at Rhea. "Then we go where they can't find us." And the wind screamed louder. "You've got 2 days to make her legal, or you bury her." Sheriff Hank's voice was still echoing in Cole's ears even after the man and his cruiser disappeared down the trail. The snow had begun again, slow at first, like the sky was reconsidering its silence. But it would pick up. It always did. Cole stood by the fire, arms crossed, staring at the German shepherd lying beside her pups. Rhea's breathing had evened out, and her eyes were half closed. The smallest pup, the one he was sure wouldn't last the night, let out a small yawn and nuzzled closer to its mother. Legal. He nearly laughed at the word. As if something about this storm, this pain, this fierce, half-starved animal could be reduced to a form on a desk. He crouched beside Rhea and ran his fingers gently behind her ears. "They want me to give you up," he said quietly. "Turn you in. Let the system decide if you deserve to live." Her ears twitched at the sound of his voice. He shook his head. "That's not going to happen." The pup stirred under the blanket. The fire cracked. Cole stood turned and grabbed the map he'd torn from the wall earlier. It was still damp from where his boots had tracked snow over the floor, but the lines were clear enough. Elk Ridge Lookout. He remembered the name from an old field ops planning exercise years back when he still ran training scenarios for rookies. It was a decommissioned fire watch tower about 5 miles southeast, tucked into a section of the forest, no longer patrolled in winter. The road hadn't been maintained in years. The Forest Service only used it in the dry season. Perfect. He traced the elevation lines with a fingertip. It's gonna be cold, rough terrain, one hell of a climb. He looked down at Rhea. Think you can manage it with 3 babies and 1 leg out of commission? She gave him a slow blink. Not an answer, but not a refusal either. Cole's fingers tightened around the map. They had 2 days, but really they had less. The sheriff had seen her. The clock had started. All it would take was 1 report to animal control. 1 ranger deciding to swing by, and Rhea would be caged, tagged, and killed before the week was out. No. He began packing supplies. His cabin wasn't big, but it had what he needed: thermal blankets, emergency rations, tactical harness, climbing rope, a collapsible sled he used to haul firewood in bulk. He rechecked the med kit, added extra painkillers and antiseptics for Rhea. Everything was methodical, precise. Not because he wasn't panicking, because he was. Because if he let emotion in, let Denver in, he wouldn't move. And if he didn't move, they would all die. He grabbed an old wool coat and began cutting it into strips to fashion a makeshift sling for Rhea's foreleg. It was awkward, clumsy. He didn't care. She needed support. If she couldn't walk part of the trail, he'd carry her. The sled he lined with pine boughs layered with tarp and his last dry sleeping bag. The pups would ride there nested and insulated. He adjusted a thermal water bladder to hang from the side close enough to the pups to warm slowly from body heat. Rhea watched the whole time. Her eyes never left him. When he came near, she sniffed the gear, nosed the sled, then returned her attention to her children. At dawn the next morning, he made a small fire and boiled snow. He spooned warm water into a tin bowl and added protein powder, stirring it until it was a makeshift broth. Rhea drank it slowly, eyes glassy, but she finished the whole thing. The splint on her leg was holding. He looked out the window. The snowfall had slowed again. A window, maybe 6 hours before the next front. He dressed in full winter gear and packed the sled. When it was time, he crouched next to Rhea, slipped the sling over her leg and whispered, "We're ghosts now. Off the map." She didn't resist when he lifted her onto the sled next to her pups. She curled her body around them, guarding them even in stillness. Cole lashed down the gear, tightened his boots, and wrapped his hands in thick climbing gloves. He strapped the towing harness across his chest, bent forward, and started walking. The sled dragged behind him with a hiss through the snow. The first mile was easy, flat, open trails. Then came the incline. Cole dug his boots in, leaned into the harness, and hauled. The sled grew heavier with every step, every branch snagging at the tarp, every root catching the runners. He cursed under his breath, wiped sweat from his brow, even as frost clung to his beard. Rhea barked once, short, sharp, when the sled hit a bump. He looked back. She was still awake, still watching. "I hear you," he grunted. "I'll go softer." By hour 3, the trees thickened. The trail narrowed, and the sun began to vanish behind a wall of gray. He checked his compass, adjusted south by a few degrees. They were halfway. Snow began to fall again. Just a whisper, but enough to remind him how little time they had. As he climbed a steeper ridge, the sled slipped sideways, nearly tipping. He dropped to one knee, threw his shoulder back, and righted it just in time. One of the pups squeaked. Cole's heart stopped. Then a tiny tail flicked. Still okay. He adjusted the harness again and kept moving. Around hour 5, the lookout came into view. A wooden structure barely taller than the tree line rising above a narrow outcrop of rock. Its steps were buried in snow, the walls gray with age. But it was shelter, and it was theirs. He dragged the sled up the final incline, his legs screaming, breath ragged. At the top, he unlatched the door with shaking fingers and kicked it open. Dust, cold, darkness, but the walls were intact. He turned, unlatched. The pups carried them in by hand, then came back for Rhea. She whined softly as he lifted her, but didn't fight. Inside, he built a fire in the old stove. It took 15 minutes of kindling one emergency fire brick and every curse word he'd ever learned. But it caught. The warmth spread slowly through the small room. He laid Rhea on a sleeping mat in the corner, the pups beside her. Then he collapsed flat on his back, arms shaking from exhaustion. Outside, the snow picked up again, faster this time. More urgent. Cole didn't care. Not yet. They had made it. But as he looked at the cracked ceiling and heard the first howl of wind batter the lookout windows, he knew something was coming, and they might not be alone for long. They call it hiding. I call it choosing who gets to live. Cole muttered the words under his breath as he layered more pine boughs along the windows of the Elk Ridge lookout. He jammed a folded tarp across the largest crack in the doorframe and stepped back to study his work. The old ranger station wasn't much, but it was holding for now. The pups lay curled together inside a hollow he'd built using his sleeping bag and firewood bundles insulated by every thermal blanket he had left. Rhea hadn't moved much since they arrived. She was exhausted in pain, but not broken. Her eyes still followed every motion he made, every sound outside the walls. The fire in the corner stove burned hot and low, casting long shadows across the cabin's aging timber. Melted snow hissed in a pot, steaming the window panes and fogging his breath. Outside, the world had disappeared again into white. The second front had hit faster than expected. Cole wiped his hands on his pants and crossed to Rhea. He crouched, checked the splint, and replaced the makeshift sling that had loosened during the climb. Her breathing was even. No fever. But she was hungry. They all were. He fed her by hand another batch of powdered broth and boiled jerky ground to paste. She licked it clean, then rested her head on her paws and closed her eyes. "I know," he said softly. "I wish I had more." He hadn't counted on needing this much. The supplies in the sled were almost gone, and the cache up at the cabin was still full, untouched safe. But now 5 miles away, through thick forest and a full-on blizzard, if the storm kept building, they wouldn't make it another 2 days on what they had left, which meant he had no choice. Cole stood layered up and double-laced his boots. The map he'd brought showed a short route back downhill through dense forest, hugging the ridgeline, maybe 3 hours, if the trail hadn't vanished completely. He could do it in 2 if he hustled. Pack up some food, fuel fresh water, and make it back before nightfall. He threw on his parka, clipped the hunting knife to his belt, and checked his compass. Storm or not, he couldn't risk GPS interference. He'd seen too many rescue missions go south because someone trusted their phone more than their gut. He hesitated at the door. Rhea's eyes opened. She watched him unmoving. "I'll be back before dark," he said. "Stay warm. Stay breathing." She gave a soft whine, low and almost human. He closed the door behind him. The storm hit him like a freight train. Visibility was down to maybe 5 feet. Snow whipped sideways, slicing his cheeks and filling every gap in his gear. He pulled his scarf higher, adjusted his hood, and leaned into the wind. The trees blurred around him as he moved. The first half-mile was slow, and the cold bit through every layer. He moved by memory and feel, not sight. Landmarks were gone, buried under feet of white. Every step was a gamble, every sound masked by the roar of wind. And something else. The silence beneath the noise. Cole slowed, tilted his head. Something felt wrong. Not dangerous exactly, just off. He pushed on. Behind him, the snow covered his trail as fast as he laid it. By the time he hit the halfway point, his fingers were stiff and aching. He flexed them in his gloves, tried to keep blood moving. The image of Rhea lying curled around the pups drove him forward. He finally reached the outer line of the cabin clearing. A familiar knot of pines stood silhouetted in the white. Relief hit hard in his chest. He didn't stop to rest. He pushed into the cabin and slammed the door behind him, panting, gloves, soaked face raw. He immediately started packing. Dehydrated meals, canned stew, 2 extra gas canisters, bandages, water purifier. He double-bagged everything, layered it in the bottom of his pack, added heat packs and matches. Then he scanned the shelves for one last thing. His hand stopped on the old emergency beacon. Still functional. If something went wrong out there, if he didn't come back, someone would eventually find it. Eventually. He clicked it on, then shoved it under a floorboard beneath the woodpile. As he turned to go, he glanced at the mantel. His badge sat there. FBI. Scuffed cold metal. He stared at it for a moment, then left it where it was. Outside, the storm had gotten worse. He gritted his teeth and started the climb back. The snow was deeper now, up to his knees in some places. The trail had vanished. He had to rely on the ridgeline, follow the feel of the land. The wind screamed louder, pushing him sideways. By the time he reached the halfway mark, his legs burned. His breath came in sharp gasps, but the lookout was close, maybe 40 minutes. Then something hit him. A shift in the air, a pressure drop, a crack, not thunder, not tree fall, something else. His gut clenched. He looked up and saw nothing but white. He pushed harder. He knew this feeling, knew this specific silence, the kind that came right before something bad happened. When he finally crested the last hill and saw the outline of the ranger station, something in his chest seized. It was partially buried. Snow drifted high against one wall. A corner of the roof was gone. No smoke from the stovepipe. No sound. No. He dropped the pack and sprinted. The door was half open. Snow had blown inside. The blankets were overturned. The sleeping mat was collapsed inward like something had fallen onto it. Rhea, he called, voice sharp. Rhea. No answer. Then beneath the overturned blankets he saw a paw. Still. He rushed forward, heart pounding, and pulled back the tarp. And froze. Rhea was there, body curled limp, shielding the pups with every inch of her weight. One leg stretched unnaturally. Her breathing was ragged, but she was alive. The pups beneath her whimpered barely. She had covered them. Taken the weight of the ceiling collapse and the cold. Used her body to hold the world off them. Oh my God, Cole whispered, dropping to his knees. He reached out, stroked the back of her head. You're okay. You held on. Her eyes fluttered. One opened barely, then closed again. Cole turned to the stove. The coals had gone cold. He tore off his gloves and scrambled for firewood. His hands shook as he lit a match. 1 spark. 2. The third caught. Flame. He built it fast. No finesse. Just heat. Just survival. He moved Rhea and the pups closer, wrapped them again, placed a hand on her chest. Still breathing, but weaker. They had hours. Maybe less. Cole stood, paced the room, looked around at the half-collapsed wall, the roof, the drifting snow still falling inside. He had brought them here to hide, and now he had to decide if staying hidden would kill them all. You can run from the law or run from mercy. You don't get to outrun both. Cole stared at the fire shoulder's tense jaw locked. The flames flickered violently, dancing shadows across the broken walls of the lookout tower. Wind moaned through the gaps like a warning no one wanted to give aloud. Rhea lay curled in the same spot, but weaker now. Her breath was shallow. Her back leg, already splinted, trembled every few minutes. The ceiling beam that had caved in must have clipped her during the collapse. Cole had checked for internal bleeding. No obvious signs. But something was wrong. Her eyes barely opened. Her head hadn't lifted in almost an hour. The pups were still tucked against her warm underlayers of wool and pine. One had started to cry again, soft, persistent, but the others were silent. Too silent. He moved across the room, crouched, and gently pressed his fingers to the smallest pup's side. Still breathing, but barely. Cole wiped sweat and snow from his brow, exhaled through his teeth, and leaned back against the log wall. His body ached from the supply run. His shoulders throbbed. His hands were blistered from gripping the rope. His heart, well, that was worse. Because now it wasn't just about him anymore. Not about exile, or penance, or what happened in Denver. This was about them, and they were dying. He stood suddenly, pushing off the floor, and paced. The map was spread out on the table, weighted down with a half-empty thermos. He leaned over it, scanned every inch. There were two options: stay or move. Stay meant shelter, sort of. But with a busted roof and a compromised structure, it also meant exposure. The next storm would finish what the last one started. And Rhea. She didn't have another storm left in her. Move meant risk. Visibility in the forest was still near zero. The terrain was brutal. The cabin was 5 miles, maybe more in this weather. But it had 4 walls, a stove, medical supplies, a satellite radio. He grabbed his jacket, because the truth was they weren't going to survive another night out here. He had to get them out. He pulled the sled from the back wall, checked the rigging, layered fresh insulation. The pups went in first, wrapped tighter than before, nested in a bundle of dry towels and heated pads from the emergency pack. Then he turned to Rhea. Her eyes opened just a sliver as he approached. "I know," he said gently. "You're tired. You're hurting." She didn't growl, didn't move. "But we can't stay." Her ear twitched. He knelt beside her and slid his arms under her chest and hindquarters. She didn't resist, but her body was heavy in a new way. Not just exhaustion, something deeper, like she was slipping further away. "No," he whispered. "You don't get to give up, not after all this." He placed her in the sled, beside her pups, and wrapped another layer over her body, tucking the edges tight. Then he strapped himself into the harness and turned toward the door. He hesitated. What if she didn't make it? What if the pups died on the way? What if he shut the thought down and pulled the door open? The wind hit like a wall. Snow sliced sideways across the trail, blinding and brutal. But he didn't stop. 1 foot, then the other. The sled dragged behind him, wheels groaning beneath the weight. He didn't take the high ridge this time. It was too exposed. Instead, he followed the tree line, ducking under branches heavy with snow, weaving between drifts. The cold bit deeper with every hour. His breath came in sharp gasps. His legs burned, but he kept moving. For them. Because if he stopped, he'd be back in Denver. back in that stairwell, back in the dark. "You can run from the law or run from mercy," he muttered. "You don't get to outrun both." His boot slipped on a patch of ice, sending him to one knee. He caught himself with a grunt and looked back. Ria's eyes were closed. Too long. He moved faster. By hour 3, the forest thinned and the slope changed. He knew this part. The long bend, the stretch of flat rock that froze first in November. They were close. He turned the final bend and saw it. The cabin, his cabin, still standing. Smoke still clung to the roofline from the last fire. The windows were frosted but intact. The sight nearly dropped him to the ground. He unclipped the harness and sprinted. The last few feet, yanked the door open, then ran back and dragged the sled inside. Warmth, still air, safety. He turned first to the pups, unzipped the layers, checked each heartbeat. Weak, but there. Then to Ria. Her chest rose. Barely. He moved quickly. Set up the emergency IV from the med kit, threaded the line into her flank, just beneath the skin, taped it in place. Fluids started to flow. He swabbed her ears, nose, and mouth with warm cloth, trying to bring her temp back up. The fire roared to life in minutes. He placed the pups beside her again. One opened its mouth, squeaked. Relief flooded him, and panic, because he knew this was only temporary. The next storm was already forming on the edge of the valley, and if anyone tracked them, Sheriff Hank, or worse, they'd be found, and this time no paperwork or apologies would buy them a chance. He sat beside the fire hand on Ria's neck and felt the faint pulse there. Thought about the radio in the supply chest. Thought about calling in help. A vet. A wildlife rescue. But calling meant exposure. Calling meant explaining why he had an injured, undocumented dog in a closed national forest with 3 newborn pups, no permit and no record. He looked down at Ria again. What he saw wasn't a stray. It was a survivor. And if anyone tried to take her now, they'd have to come through him. He leaned his head back against the wall. Tomorrow they'd have to figure out what came next. But tonight, they were alive. And that was enough. They think survival makes you dangerous. But it's the love underneath it that really scares them. The cabin groaned under the pressure of new snow, each sound like a breath being held too long. Cole sat with his back against the wood stove, the fire low but steady, casting a soft orange pulse across the walls. Ria lay inches away, her body wrapped in thermal layers, the pups nestled into her side. She was breathing easier now, slower, but steadier. Cole hadn't slept. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the moment the ceiling gave way. The sickening lurch of the lookout floor. The weight of snow crashing down. If she had been even a foot to the left, they'd be dead. All of them. He poured more melted snow into the tin kettle, letting it steam on the stove. His fingers trembled not from cold, but from a growing sense that time was running out. That the fragile piece they'd carved here wouldn't hold much longer. It was almost morning. The edge of dawn slipped through the frost-coated windows like a reluctant truth. He stood and walked over to the supply chest, pulled out the radio. He'd been avoiding this moment. The decision he'd promised he wouldn't make. But after the last 24 hours, the risk of staying hidden now felt like a greater threat than being found. He clicked the switch. Static hissed. He flipped the channel dial to 7 local ranger frequency, held the mic, hesitated, then pressed. "This is Cole Walker, Elk Ridge sector. I've got a wounded animal. Mother, 3 pups, injured leg, possible internal bruising. Immediate need for vet care. He released the mic, waited. Nothing. He tried again, then switched to Channel 4 Emergency Dispatch. Cole Walker, former federal, located 4 miles north of Crater Pass, requesting wildlife assistance. This is a medical situation. He stood there staring at the radio, waiting for the hum of a voice. Anything. Finally, after nearly a minute, a voice crackled through. Copy that, Walker. Dispatch here. Say again your coordinates. His stomach dropped. That was it. The line had been crossed. He gave them the details. 10-4, the dispatcher replied. We'll relay to Fish and Wildlife. Might take a few hours. Roads are a mess. He clicked off the radio and stared at it. You just painted a target, he said to himself. Let's hope they come with help instead of a warrant. Behind him, Rhea shifted. The smallest pup squeaked. He turned. Her eyes were open, focused. She watched him for a long beat. I had to, he said softly. They won't make it otherwise. She blinked, slow, trusting, and that gutted him more than anything. He made broth again, fed it to her slowly, cleaned the pups, replaced the thermal pads. Every motion was careful, deliberate, like ritual, like apology. It was past noon when he heard the sound. A truck engine. Distant. Then closer. Snow crunching under tires. Cole stood, grabbed his coat, and stepped out onto the porch. A green and white Fish and Wildlife vehicle crawled into view. It parked at the edge of the clearing. 2 figures stepped out, one tall and broad, the other leaner, younger. Both carried gear. Medical packs, tranquilizer case, tags. He walked out to meet them, heart pounding. The older man spoke first. Walker, yeah. I'm Agent Rourke. This is Technician Lane. You're the one with the emergency. Cole nodded. Inside. But I have conditions. Rourke raised an eyebrow. You're not in a position to set terms. I'm not turning over an aggressive animal, Cole said firmly. She's not wild. She's protective. There's a difference. Rourke's face hardened. She bit someone. No. She saved 3 pups during a roof collapse. She's injured, but she let me treat her. No sign of rabies. No outward signs of aggression. You pull a gun on her, I'll stop you. Lane glanced at Rourke, who gave a short nod. Lead us in. Cole opened the door slowly and motioned them inside. The warmth hit hard, so did the smell of fur, antiseptic, and smoke. Rhea lifted her head slightly when they entered. Her eyes tracked them, calm but wary. Lane crouched first, speaking gently. Hey there, girl. You've been through it, huh? Rourke circled, inspecting the splint, the pups, the stove. No collar, he muttered. No tags. No chip. She's got a name, Cole said. Rhea. Rourke looked at him. You naming her doesn't make her legal. Cole stepped forward. I'm not asking for legal. I'm asking for humane. Give her care. Give the pups a chance. Lane gently stroked Rhea's head. She's responsive. Pups' temps are borderline but stable. We'll need to transport her. Cole tensed. We're Wildlife Rehab Center. Closest one's in Gunnison. 2-hour drive. They'll kill her if she's undocumented. Lane looked up. No. Not if she's shown this much resilience. There's a process. Rehab. Fostering. Possible domestic transfer. And if they find out she attacked livestock before, Rourke looked over sharply. Did she? Cole didn't answer. Because the truth was, he didn't know. She was scarred, skittish, starved when he found her. She might have done anything to survive. But that wasn't the dog lying in front of him now. Lane spoke gently. "Walker, we want to help, but you've got to meet us halfway." Cole closed his eyes, thought about Denver, about the kid in the rubble, about second chances. "Fine," he said. "You take them. But I'm going too." Rourke frowned. "We can't allow you want my cooperation. I ride in the truck. I don't leave her." A long pause. Then Lane nodded. "Let's load them up." Cole watched as they wrapped Rhea in a transport sling, gently lifted her into the back of the vehicle. The pups went in a heated crate nestled in towels. As they shut the truck doors, Rourke turned to him. "You know this could have gone a lot worse." Cole stared at the cabin. It still might. Then he climbed into the back seat, sat beside the crate, and didn't look back. Because now they were on a different trail. One he couldn't walk alone. They don't want the story. They want the evidence to disappear. The tires hummed against the ice-packed road, the rhythm steady but tense. Cole sat in the back of the Fish and Wildlife truck, one arm resting on the crate that held the pups, the other hovering just inches from Rhea's still form, strapped beside him. The temperature inside the cab was warm, but he couldn't shake the cold, pressed deep into his bones. She hadn't opened her eyes since the loading. Lane sat in the front passenger seat, his eyes flicking to the rear view every few minutes. Rourke drove his jaw, tight focus sharp. Neither had said much since they left the cabin. The silence was filled with the soft panting of the pups and the occasional crackle of the radio spitting static. Cole kept checking her pulse. Still there. Barely. "We're about 30 minutes out from the facility," Lane called back. "There's a trauma bay. They'll stabilize her first." "She doesn't just need a vet," Cole said. "She needs someone who gives a damn whether she lives." Lane met his eyes through the mirror. "They've got good people, Walker. Vets who do this for rescues and wildlife full-time. That's not what I'm worried about." Rourke gave him a sidelong glance. "Then what are you worried about?" Cole looked down at Rhea, at her ribs rising and falling like it hurt to breathe. "I'm worried someone higher up decides this case is inconvenient. An undocumented, untagged dog with behavioral unknowns. A civilian who interfered with protocol. This isn't just about rescue anymore. It's about optics." Lane frowned. "You think someone would cover it up?" Cole's voice was steady. "I've seen it happen. You don't have to lie to bury the truth. You just stop telling the story." Rourke didn't respond. Cole leaned back, heart pounding. They passed a frozen lake, trees leaning in like spectators, heavy with snow. Somewhere beneath that surface was a world frozen in time, unmoving, waiting. So was he. They reached the facility just after dusk. It didn't look like much, a low-slung building nestled into a pine grove, floodlights illuminating the lot, a metal fence separating it from the open forest beyond. But inside, the lights were bright, the smell sharp with antiseptic, and the energy brisk. A team of 3 staffers met them at the bay doors. One of them, a woman in her 40s, with wind-burned cheeks and a clipboard under her arm, stepped forward fast. "Rhea," she asked. Cole blinked. "You already know her name," Lane radioed ahead, she said, eyes scanning the dog's body. "We prepped the surgical suite." They moved her quickly. No time wasted. Cole followed, but Rourke blocked him. "You've got to stay in the lobby." "The hell I do." Walker Lane interjected gently. "Let them work. We'll get updates as soon as she's stable." Reluctantly, Cole backed off. He paced the lobby for nearly an hour. It was quiet. Clean. A few chairs lined one wall. A bulletin board held faded photos of rescued foxes, owls, even a moose calf. The pups were taken into a side room, examined, cleaned, and fed. Their tiny bodies now squirmed and mewled with renewed energy. That gave him some hope, but not enough. Finally, the vet came out. The woman from earlier. She removed her gloves and pushed her hair back under a surgical cap. She's stable. For now. Cole stood. But she's septic. The wound from the trap wasn't just deep, it went through tissue. There was infection. The splint helped, but we'll need surgery. Amputation, most likely. He swallowed hard. Will she survive? If she makes it through tonight, I'd say her chances go up dramatically. She's a fighter. But she's been starved, exhausted, exposed to multiple stress events. She saved those pups during a collapse, Cole said. Took the hit for them. The vet nodded. I believe it. We've seen trauma loyalty before. It's rare, but powerful. He ran a hand down his face. Can I see her? She's under sedation. But yes. Just for a moment. He followed her through double doors, down a hallway lined with observation windows and stainless steel equipment. Rhea was laid out on a padded table, IVs, running oxygen mask, gently fogging. She looked smaller than before. Fragile. But when he placed his hand on her paw, she twitched. Hey, he whispered. You're here. You made it. He stayed until they moved her to post-op recovery. Back in the lobby, Rourke was on the phone, pacing. When he hung up, his face was stiffer than usual. Problem? Cole asked. We got a call from the sheriff's office. Apparently someone reported you leaving the trail access with an untagged animal. There's interest. Higher up than I like. Cole's jaw clenched. Of course there is. I did what I could to stall. Said the animal's already been turned in paperwork, is being processed, yada yada. But it's not going to hold forever. They don't want the story, Cole muttered. They want the evidence to disappear. Rourke stared at him. Is there something I should know, something bigger than this dog? Cole looked out the window into the dark beyond the floodlights. He thought about Denver, about the boy, about the badge sitting in his old cabin collecting dust. No, he said finally. Just that sometimes mercy comes wrapped in red tape. Rourke didn't push. Later that night, Lane came to find him. Want to help name the pups, he asked with a tired smile. We're tagging them for intake. Cole blinked. They lived, all three. He followed Lane to the intake room. The pups had been bathed and fed, now curled up in a warming crate, soft whines rising as they dreamed. 1 male, 2 females, Lane said. You get dibs. Cole stared at them. He thought about second chances. Name the little guy Dusty, he said, because he made it out of the collapse first. Lane grinned. Fitting. And the girls, he pointed to the bigger one. That's Juniper. Looks strong, curious. And the last one, Cole hesitated. The smallest pup opened her eyes. Just a little, just enough to meet his. He smiled. Call her Echo. She's got the quietest voice, but it sticks with you. Lane nodded and made the notes. As the pups drifted back to sleep, Cole sat nearby watching them breathe. In that moment, it didn't matter who was coming. Didn't matter what records said. These lives were real, and that meant something. Sometimes doing the right thing just means standing still when everyone else runs. The waiting room had emptied out by midnight, but Cole remained in the same chair near the window, watching snow filter past the orange glow of the security lights. He hadn't slept. Couldn't. Every sound, every creak of boots in the hall, every muttered voice over the radio put him back on edge. The pups had been moved into a quieter wing of the center kept under observation. Rhea was still under sedation post-op, her vitals stable, but not improving as fast as the vet had hoped. That was the part Cole hated most, knowing he couldn't fight the battle for her. Couldn't carry her through it. She had to do it alone. But she wasn't alone. Not anymore. He leaned forward and rubbed his face. His stubble itched with sweat and cold. He needed real food, a shower, sleep, but none of that mattered until she was out of the woods. Lane came in with 2 steaming mugs. Thought you might need caffeine more than your pride right now. Cole accepted the mug and nodded. Thanks. Lane sat down beside him, took a long sip. They're moving fast upstairs. Who? Cole asked. Admin, legal, animal control, even the media liaison for the center's starting to ask questions. Cole tensed. Media Lane shrugged. Cute pups. Hero dog. A recluse ex-agent living in the wilderness who saved them during a snowstorm. It's the kind of headline that writes itself. Cole didn't smile. Yeah, until someone asks where she came from. Or what happened in Denver, Lane added quietly. That landed harder than Cole expected. He hadn't told them. Not fully. They'd pieced some things together, the badge, the scars, the fact that someone like him didn't end up off-grid without a reason. But he hadn't spoken the boy's name. Hadn't told the part that woke him up sweating every other night. Look, Lane said after a moment, I know what it's like to carry something you can't outrun. But I also know what it looks like when someone starts running towards something instead. Cole glanced at him. Lane held his gaze. You didn't hide her. You brought her in. That means something. Cole nodded slowly. Yeah, it does. A knock interrupted them. Rourke stepped into the room, a paper folder in one hand, his expression unreadable. We've got a problem, he said. Cole stood instantly. What now? Rourke set the file down. There's an inquiry opened out of Denver. They flagged your radio transmission. Apparently someone in the sheriff's office back near Elk Ridge sent a tip that an FBI agent formerly suspended is interfering with a wildlife investigation. Suspended. Lane repeated, eyes flicking to Cole. Cole exhaled. I wasn't suspended. I resigned before the inquiry could finish. Rourke raised an eyebrow. You want to fill in the rest for us? Cole leaned against the wall. The pressure behind his eyes felt like it had been waiting for days. There was a hostage case, he began. A warehouse kidnap for ransom scenario. The suspect had a kid maybe 8 years old strapped to a pressure plate rigged to an IED. I made the call to go in early. We breached before backup secured the perimeter. Lane went still. Cole continued, voice flat. We got the kid out. But the suspect tripped the failsafe. Another agent, Sarah Vega, didn't make it. They opened an inquiry, said my call was impulsive, that I escalated too fast. Maybe I did. I still see her face. The silence that followed was heavy, respectful. So I walked away, Cole finished. Moved to the woods. Took odd security jobs. Tried not to think too hard. Lane stood and paced. That doesn't change what you did here. Doesn't undo Rhea. No, Rourke agreed. But it complicates the picture. Animal control may use your history to argue Rhea's placement is unsafe. They'll paint her as a liability, a dangerous rescue cared for by a disgraced agent. Cole clenched his fists. They'll kill her. Not yet, Rourke said, but they've filed a motion to relocate her to a secure wildlife containment facility until a final determination is made. That's code for disappear quietly. Lane swore. How long do we have? 2 days before transport, Rourke said. Unless someone intervenes. Cole looked up. Like who? Public attention. Press. A vet statement. Character witnesses. Something to change the story. Lane perked up. I might know someone. A wildlife blogger who freelances for the Post. She owes me a favor. Do it, Rourke said. Get her here tomorrow. I'll prep a statement, Lane added. Something that paints Rhea in the light she deserves. Cole nodded slowly. What can I do? Stay visible, Rourke said. Tell your story on your terms. Let them see it from your eyes. That night, as Cole sat beside Rhea again, he spoke softly to her unconscious form. You're not going back in a cage, he said. Not while I'm breathing. He stayed there until sunrise. By the next morning, the center buzzed with unfamiliar energy. A woman with silver hair and a press badge arrived mid-morning, camera already in hand. Lane introduced her as Talia Nguyen, environmental reporter. She interviewed Cole in the main treatment room, her voice soft, her questions pointed. What made you risk so much for her? She asked. Cole looked into the lens, thought about blood in the snow, about a paw laid across 3 newborns, about the low growl Rhea gave when he first touched her, and how it slowly changed into trust. Because she didn't give up on them, he said, even when the world tried to bury her. The story went live that afternoon. The response was immediate. Hundreds of comments, donations to the center, messages from rescue organizations offering to sponsor Rhea's care. One video clip of Cole crouched beside the crate with Echo pawing at his boot went viral, and that made things more dangerous. By nightfall, a black SUV pulled into the lot. No markings, no wildlife insignia. 2 men stepped out, badges tucked into lanyards. One held a clipboard. Cole watched them from the lobby window. Rourke joined him. Containment review team. They want to evaluate the transport early. They think if they move fast, no one will stop them. Cole muttered. Rourke looked at him. You ready to fight this? Cole didn't hesitate. Sometimes doing the right thing just means standing still when everyone else runs, he said. And I'm not running anymore. Together they stepped outside. They always say the system works until someone like her proves it doesn't. Cole stood stiff-backed at the edge of the parking lot, snow crunching beneath his boots, as the 2 men from the SUV approached. Their windbreakers bore no visible logos, no state patches, just the hollow official look of people who worked behind closed doors. One held a clipboard. The other scanned the facility like he was casing a threat. The clipboard guy spoke first. Cole Walker. That's me, Cole replied, keeping his stance relaxed but rooted. We're here on behalf of the Interagency Wildlife Containment Oversight Board. We have orders to transfer custody of the canine currently referred to as Rhea. She's not going anywhere. Mr. Walker, the man continued. Voice cool, rehearsed, this is a procedural action. It's not up for negotiation. Cole smiled, but there was no warmth behind it. You brought paperwork. I brought a crowd. He stepped aside. From the lobby windows behind him, a growing group of supporters watched, some press, some center volunteers, even a couple from the sheriff's office who'd heard the story through back channels. And then there was Talia Nguyen, camera slung at her hip, already rolling. Her viral blog post had snowballed overnight into a trending story, the mother of Elk Ridge, and now people cared. A lot. The man with the clipboard hesitated, his eyes scanning the glass where faces stared back. This transfer is within protocol, he repeated. Lane emerged from the front door holding a folder. We've filed a stay through the Department of Wildlife. Emergency petition for medical exemption under Article 42B. She can't be moved until a federal vet review clears her for transport. The second agent stepped forward. This was a directive from higher up. I don't care if it was from the Secretary of the Interior, Cole said. She's recovering from surgery, and if you move her now, she dies. That's not relocation. That's a quiet execution. Clipboard guy stiffened. We're operating within legal bounds. So was every bad decision I ever made, Cole replied. Didn't make them right. The wind picked up swirling flakes sideways across the lot. The tension hung heavy, the air sharp with conflict. You're obstructing a legal transfer, the second agent said. No, Lane cut in. We're challenging it. Then Rourke appeared. He wore his field jacket badge clipped to his belt and an expression that said he was done playing nice. These men are invoking jurisdiction under the wrong statute, he said. Containment transfer orders don't override an emergency petition unless imminent threat is established. There's been no such designation filed on this animal. You're out of your depth, the agent said. And you're about to have a lawsuit on your hands, Rourke replied. I've already contacted the State Wildlife Ethics Board. If you put one hand on that dog, I'll personally file for federal injunction under the Endangered Care Clause. And we both know how messy that gets. For a moment, no one moved. Then Clipboard Guy exhaled through his nose and stepped back. We'll return with a clearance. You do that, Cole said. But next time, bring a conscience. The agents turned, re-entered their SUV, and drove off, tires skidding on the icy lot. Inside, the mood was a mix of quiet victory and anxiety. They'll come back, Lane said. I know, Cole replied. But next time, so will we. He headed straight to the recovery wing. Rhea was resting on her side, her breathing shallow but even. When he stepped in, her ear twitched. You're trending, he said softly, sitting beside her. You broke the internet, and possibly 2 federal agents' pride. Her eye cracked open for a second, closed again. He watched her breathe for a long time. Every rise of her chest reminded him of the stakes, of why he'd stopped running. Because the world didn't change by hiding. It changed when someone stayed, when someone refused to back down. Later that evening, Talia pulled him aside. Her laptop glowed with comments, emails, story drafts. You've got something here, she said. People are starting to talk. Not just animal rights activists. Parents, veterans, teachers. They're not just reading this as a dog story. Cole raised an eyebrow. Then what are they reading it as? A story about a second chance that wasn't given, it was fought for. He thought about that for a long second. What happens now? He asked. You make it bigger, she said. You take the microphone before someone else spins your silence. By the next morning, a petition to halt Rhea's transfer had surpassed 70,000 signatures. Local news stations picked it up. Then a national radio show. Even a morning anchor mentioned it between a weather segment and a viral dance clip. That night, Cole was asked to speak. The center hosted a town hall, small, local, informal, but live-streamed. He stood behind a makeshift podium in front of folding chairs and heat lamps surrounded by snow and strangers who suddenly cared. He didn't prepare a speech. He just spoke. I didn't bring Rhea in for attention, he said. I didn't expect to be in front of cameras. I just saw a mother dying in the snow, protecting her pups with everything she had. And I saw something in her I hadn't seen in myself for a long time, hope. He paused, letting that sit. They say she's dangerous, that she's unpredictable. Maybe. But so is anyone who's ever been left behind and had to figure out what survival really means. A hush fell over the crowd. She didn't attack anyone. She didn't bite. She trusted me. And I failed a lot of people before her. But not this time. He looked straight into the lens. They always say the system works until someone like her proves it doesn't. Applause rose slowly, genuine, sharp, real. Back inside, as the team checked Ria's vitals again, Cole sat in silence. The floodgates had opened. There would be more pushback, more paperwork, maybe even a legal battle. But now it wasn't just his fight. It belonged to everyone who believed that survival didn't make you dangerous. It made you brave. Lane joined him at the edge of the room, arms crossed. I spoke to a sanctuary in Montana, he said. They're willing to take her in. Full vet care. No cages. Room to roam. They'd even keep the pups close by. Cole nodded slow. Thought it over. She deserves that, he said. You think she'll be okay without you? Cole smiled faintly. She won't be without me. I'll find a way to visit. Then from the far side of the room came a small, high-pitched whine. Echo had woken up. She stumbled out of the blanket pile, unsteady on her feet, and waddled toward Cole's boot. He picked her up gently, held her to his chest. She might stay with me, he said. Call it poetic justice. Lane grinned. That pup's got your stubborn streak. Cole looked down at her, then at Ria, and for the first time in years, something inside him eased. They had survived the storm. Now it was time to build something from it. Some scars don't fade, but some grow softer when someone finally sees them. The snow had started to melt, leaving behind patches of brown earth and exposed stone. The wind still had its bite, but it no longer howled like it was trying to rip through the world. Instead, it whispered like the forest itself was exhaling after a long-held breath. Cole stood alone on the ridge behind the Wildlife Center, looking out over the valley. The same valley where he'd once hidden broken and lost just trying to survive one more winter. Now he watched as workers from the Montana sanctuary loaded the last of the transport crates onto the truck. The pups had grown stronger. Dusty was already trying to assert dominance, gnawing on everything that moved. Juniper had become the loud one, alert to every sound. Echo, quiet as ever, rarely left Cole's side. And Ria. She'd healed enough to stand. Enough to walk. Enough to stare down the people who once saw her as a threat and make them reconsider everything they thought they knew about resilience. He could still see the scar running along her left side, the slight hitch in her gait. But when she moved, she did it with purpose, with strength. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was proof. Lane came up beside him, hands buried in his jacket pockets. They'll be good up there, he said. The sanctuary has a dedicated vet team, open terrain, heated barns in winter, and they agreed to keep them all together. Cole nodded, jaw tight. I know. You sure you don't want to go with them? At least for the first few weeks, Cole didn't answer at first. His gaze stayed fixed on the open gate of the truck, the way Ria calmly sat inside the padded kennel, like she already knew the next chapter had begun. She'll be fine, Cole finally said. She's stronger than all of us. Lane hesitated, then spoke softer. She'll miss you. She doesn't need me to survive anymore. That's not the same as not needing you. Cole gave a weak smile, eyes still locked on her. She gave me something I didn't think I deserved. She didn't care about my record or my guilt. She just trusted me. He blinked, fighting the sharpness building behind his eyes. That changes you. Lane nodded. Yeah, it does. Talia approached, camera bags slung over her shoulder. They're almost done loading, she said. You want to say goodbye? Cole hesitated. Then slowly he walked down the hill. Inside the truck, the pups were restless but healthy. A volunteer closed the latch on the rear crate securing Juniper. Dusty barked once, then yawned dramatically. Echo watched him approach through the bars and let out the smallest sound, a cross between a chirp and a sigh. "Hey, little one," he murmured, crouching down. "You're gonna do great." He lingered for a second, then turned to the larger crate. Rhea met his gaze. Her eyes held steady, no panic or fear. Just that same quiet understanding that had always made him feel seen. He opened the crate slowly. She didn't move. Instead, she leaned forward, pressed her muzzle to his shoulder, and stayed there. For a long, quiet minute, neither of them moved. The air buzzed with low voices and the hum of diesel, but Cole barely heard it. When she pulled back, he rested his hand on her neck. "You saved me, Rhea," he whispered. "Not the other way around." He locked the crate gently, gave the side 2 taps, then stepped away. The transport pulled out slowly, tires crunching gravel, the weight of the moment pressing down harder than he expected. He watched until the truck disappeared into the trees, until the valley was silent again. Later that evening, back at the now quiet center, Cole wandered the halls one last time. The place felt different, lighter, like it had exhaled along with the forest. He found Lane in the main office, sorting paperwork and closing out files. "So what now?" Lane asked without looking up. Cole shrugged. "I go back to the cabin for a while. Clean out what's left. Maybe head into town." Lane looked at him. "You ever think about coming back full-time? Wildlife protection's always short on hands." "I don't know," Cole said honestly. "I'm not used to sticking around after things end. But maybe this one's not ending." Cole gave a small smile. "I'm not sure who I am without something to run from," he admitted. "But I think I'm ready to find out." They stood there for a second, the quiet between them companionable. Then Cole spoke again. "I left the bureau because I couldn't carry what I'd done. But Rhea never asked me to explain. She just laid down beside me like my past didn't scare her." Lane nodded slowly. "Some scars don't fade, but some grow softer when someone finally sees them." Cole looked out the window toward the empty drive where the truck had been. "Maybe that's enough," he said. "Maybe being seen is how you heal." Lane folded the last of the forms, set them aside. "You'll see them again, you know. We'll coordinate the check-ins, maybe even set up a public visit." Cole didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped outside. The air had warmed slightly. The snow was softening into slush. The trees stood tall, their burden lightened. He didn't feel hunted anymore. Didn't feel hidden. He just felt present. And that he realized was new. He took one long breath, then walked into the evening, not away from something, but towards something he couldn't name yet. Something better. The first real thaw came a week into March. Elk Ridge shook off its snowpack like a dog shaking off a long sleep. Ice cracked on the lakes. Trees began to shed white coats, revealing bark and green underneath. It was subtle but unmistakable. Winter was losing its grip. Cole sat on the cabin steps, boots in the mud, holding a mug that had long gone cold. Behind him, the place looked cleaner, more open. He'd repaired the roof, refinished the floor, cleared out the corner where he used to stack unopened mail and guilt. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't broken anymore. Like him. Echo lay curled at his feet, her nose twitching at every breeze. She'd grown fast, sleek, and curious, always listening, always shadowing him like she wanted to make sure he didn't disappear again. He didn't mind. Not even a little. He reached down and scratched behind her ear. She made that soft half-sigh she always did when she was content. A Jeep pulled up the drive. He stood brushing off his jeans as the engine shut off. Lane stepped out with a grin and a box tucked under one arm. Brought mail. And supplies, he called. Cole raised an eyebrow. Mail, I didn't think I was on a list anymore. Lane shrugged. Turns out people still want to find you when you save a life or four. They carried the box inside together. Echo trotted in after them. Lane set it on the table and opened the top flap. Inside were letters, dozens of them, some handwritten, some typed, some from adults, others from children. Drawings of dogs with capes, stories from strangers who'd adopted rescues. Thank yous from people who said the video of Rhea had helped them get out of bed, or find hope, or start over. Cole flipped one open. Dear Mr. Walker, it read. I watched the video of Rhea with my son. He's 10. We just lost our own dog and he hadn't smiled in weeks. When he saw Rhea, he said, she's like a hero dog. That night, he asked if we could adopt a puppy from a shelter. We pick her up on Tuesday. Another came from a retired fire captain. My crew used to call me cold-hearted until I cried watching your story. Don't know what that says about me, but I know what it says about her. And another from a woman who simply wrote, your dog reminded me that broken doesn't mean beyond repair. Thank you. Cole's throat tightened. He kept reading. There were so many. Lane was watching him from across the table. You realize you started something right? I didn't do it for the story, Cole said. I know, Lane replied. That's why it mattered. He pulled out a photo next to glossy print from the Montana sanctuary. Rhea stood in an open field, one leg missing, but posture proud, the 3 pups racing around her like orbiting moons. She looked strong, whole, like she was exactly where she belonged. She's leading trail groups now, Lane said. Local kids come and learn how to track prints, observe wildlife. She's got the gentlest temperament they've ever seen in a former rescue. You wouldn't believe it if you hadn't met her before. Cole smiled. I believe it. They sat for a while going through letters. Echo climbed into Cole's lap at one point, content to rest there while he read a card from a young girl in Tennessee who signed her name with a paw print. Eventually, Lane stood. I should head back. I've got 3 bobcats and a broken fence waiting. Need help? You asking to volunteer? I'm asking to do more than sit here and feel lucky. Lane paused, then nodded slowly. I'll bring the paperwork next time. As he left, Cole stood on the porch and watched him go. The forest around him was quiet, but not empty. Birdsong had returned. Branches creaked with new life. And Cole felt still. For the first time in years, he wasn't waiting for the next bad thing. He wasn't watching the tree line bracing for loss. He was just here. He had survived winter. Now it was time to live spring. Later that night, he took Echo on a walk through the woods. The moon was bright enough to light their path, reflecting off the last patches of snow. She bounded ahead, then back, her tail a blur. When they reached the clearing above the lake, she sat beside him, gaze fixed on the horizon. He pulled a folded photo from his coat pocket, the same one from earlier. Rhea, Dusty, Juniper, Echo, together in the frame. He held it up to the moonlight, and for a moment he let himself feel everything. Not grief, not shame, gratitude, for second chances, for the kind of love that didn't ask questions, for the scarred, stubborn hearts that refused to stop beating. As the wind stirred the pines, he spoke aloud, soft but steady. You saved me too, Rhea. Echo nudged his hand. He knelt, wrapping an arm around her. "We keep going," he said. "That's what we do." And together they stood beneath the stars, two survivors learning that sometimes healing doesn't come all at once. Sometimes it arrives in quiet, persistent steps, in trust rebuilt, in mornings that come easier, in the warmth of a small heartbeat pressed against yours in the dark. This wasn't a story about a dog, or a man, or even a storm. It was about the space between breaking and rebuilding, the part no one writes down because it doesn't sound grand enough. But it was everything. Because real rescue isn't dramatic. It's patient. It's dirty. It's done in silence and shadow over long nights, with no guarantee you'll be seen. And yet you do it anyway. Because something in you remembers what it felt like to be the one no one came for. This time someone did. And that made all the difference. The trees whispered their old stories into the night, and Cole Walker listened his heart. At last no longer guarded, but open. Open to the world, open to hope, open to home.